just as Ronald Reagan was to the presidency, so Antonin Scalia was to the Supreme Court.
Here's the bottom line. I don't trust Barack Obama on the appointment of Supreme Court justices.
I understand the president has prerogative here. I got that.
Look, we need great intellect.
We're going to look for someone that most resembles
somebody just like Justice Scalia.
It would just be great if the president didn't send somebody forward and we had an election.
Perhaps it is exactly what this presidential election cycle needed. A wake-up call about the power and responsibility held in the hands of the person who gets the keys to the White House. The death of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, so close to the voting, has and should change everything in deciding whom that person will be, and has both sides hunkering down for a new and more pitched battle that could make a Republican debate look like Sunday school. Let's get to work and welcome in the professor of history at Western Connecticut State University, author of books such as The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution, American constitutional scholar, Professor Kevin Gutzman. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time on this. I want to start by just asking about Justice Scalia. Between '86 and 2014, he was the deciding vote on 342 decisions, and he voted on the conservative side 284 times in those decisions. Fair to say that this man was the most influential jurist of our time.
Well, I think he certainly was, both on the court and off. The main thing that he contributed to American culture, I think, was that he was one of the people most responsible for reorienting our way of thinking about the Constitution toward what Edwin Meese, the Attorney General who selected him for the spot, referred to as a jurisprudence of original intent. Scalia, both as Supreme Court Justice and as one of the founders of the Federalist Society, was responsible for getting people to think about the Constitution in terms of original intent. And now, not only is it more or less a consensus view among conservatives that original intent should be the starting point for discussion of the Constitution, but even most prominent liberal legal academics start by asking, well, what was the original intent?
Let's talk about the Constitution here for a moment now. Democrats say the Senate should not block the president's nomination, whomever that would be, should not slow it down. But less than a decade ago, Democratic New York Senator Chuck Schumer vowed to block any nominees from President Bush. Just to remind people, here's what he said.
I will do everything in my power to prevent one more ideological ally from joining Roberts and Alito on the court.
So is it not fair to say that we are looking at playing politics here? It is hypocritical for the Democrats to say you can't do that when they themselves wanted to do the exact same thing.
Well, it certainly is. In fact, there's nothing unusual about a majority of senators deciding that they want a particular kind of justice, or that they are opposed to a particular kind of justice. This actually is the role that the Senate was intended to play. There has come to be a common understanding that the Senate should defer to the president when it comes to the most important appointments, but really that's not the way the Constitution allocated the power of appointment. Really, it's a joint power of the Senate and the president. The president is essentially the moving party, and the Senate can dispose of his proposals. So senators, if they think that, as is the case here, President Obama favors a reading of the Constitution that's at variance with their understanding of the Constitution, are perfectly justified in saying, I've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that means not allowing you to appoint somebody who's going to tilt the balance away from my understanding of the way the Constitution is supposed to be read. This is perfectly valid.
I have about 60 seconds or so left here. New York Times today points out that if indeed it stays 4-on-4 with 4 liberal members in the Supreme Court at the moment, this may actually help the liberal wing of the Supreme Court. So in that sense, is it a mistake for Republicans to hold this off until the election for fear they may lose even more?
Well, it's always possible that the Republicans will lose seats in the Senate and not pick up the presidency in the next election, but I don't think that's the question. The question is, what's the right thing for an individual senator to do? And what we have here is a big discrepancy between the ways the two parties intend for the courts to approach the Constitution. The Republicans then believing that the Constitution as a Constitution is supposed to be read the way the people understood it when they agreed to live under it in the late 18th century, are perfectly justified, and I actually would say that they are obligated to insist that the president not be allowed to appoint another justice, because that would make a majority of people who believe that not the Constitution, but really their own policy preferences should govern.
It is something that everybody needs to do, look at their own conscience, but look at the fact that no matter how the left may whine, this is indeed how the Constitution is made to work, and they're going to have things like abortion, contraception, unions, voting rights, affirmative action, and immigration are all going to be up now on this docket this term, and they're going to have to decide where they want to go from here. Professor Kevin Gutzman, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. We will speak again soon.